Ramadan Radio, 87.9 FM. I'm your host, Osama. With us, who will be joining us shortly, is Dominic Roberts. Dominic is my former pupil master. Actually, I always say he is the person who made me as a lawyer. Fantastic person. He is one of the most genuine, lovely people that you can ever get to meet. Son of a former Sierra Leonean diplomat in London. Dominic was born in Sierra Leone in Freetown, and he lived part of his life in London, his formative years in London. Then he went back to study secondary school in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So hopefully he will be joining us soon. It's actually my fault as to why he's not on the line already, because I did not send him the Zoom meeting details. But as I say, he'll be joining us soon. Now, whilst we are waiting for Dominic, I guess everybody in Leicester is enjoying the weather. I don't know. I'm told it's hideously pouring it down with rain. As you can see behind me, I've got sunshine, and sometimes we don't know what is particularly right for us. When there is rain, we complain about it. When it's as hot and stifling as it is here at the moment, we also complain. I think, as generally speaking, as human beings, we're never satisfied with anything. So, I mean, there are times when I think I just miss that fine mist and drizzle that comes onto your face. Britain is unique from that point of view, because world you actually get the type of drizzle that you have in Britain. Anyway, so please do join us. Try and ask as many questions as you want. Feel free to do so. In terms of the numbers that you can contact us on, the best number to contact us on is actually the SMS WhatsApp number, which is 0774 88 55 055. So Dominic is just joining us now.
Hi.
Good morning, Dominic.
Morning, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you, sir. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. I'm fine also.
Well, Dominic, I've just done the introductions. I have to take the blame for why you joined us slightly late. I completely forgot to send you the link to the Zoom.
Yep.
You're looking fine, as young as ever, Dom.
Well, I keep it up. Got to keep it up.
Dominic is my pupil master. He's been at the bar since the late 1970s. He, as I earlier said, son of a former Sierra Leonean diplomat in London. I think your father was the student attaché. And having spent some early years, primary school in London, you then went back to Freetown.
Yep.
And after that, you came secondary school, and then you went back to King Edward's, I think, was it? Or
St. Edward's.
St. Edward's Catholic school in Freetown, which has its own story about it, hasn't it?
Yep, it does.
Now, Dominic, you and I first met, I think it was on a bleak winter December morning, wasn't it?
Yep.
Sorry, afternoon, late afternoon.
Late afternoon.
And this is the story, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Few days before, I get a call at my hometown, at my home in Leeds, and I had a call from a joint head of chambers on One Middle Temple Lane, who had seen my CV. She had spotted something in that CV, and she told me I should have a change of career because being an Arab, I was never gonna get to the bar. But I think that was the same thing that you'd spotted going through mounds and mounds of CVs, wasn't it?
Yes, indeed.
What was it? Tell them.
Well, actually, it's quite unique because normally people put date of birth and stop there. And you went one stage further to put place of birth, which is quite strange actually, because normally you don't put place, you put date. And I said, place of birth, Lebanon. And jokingly, I said to Denora Macaulay, who I shared a room with, that I bet you this individual has links with Sierra Leone because Lebanese people have various business interests in Freetown. And she says, nah, I don't think so. And we had a little wager. And I said, okay, if I call him for an interview, I bet you if I ask him that question towards the end of the interview, I bet you he'll say, yes, he has got links with Freetown. And she said, nah. And we said, okay, let's have a little wager, a fiver, £5, won't kill anyone. So she says, okay. And I remember I called you, in the evening, I had so many other people to call, and I called you. And you said, yeah, you can come down for an interview on Monday. And I sort of said, well, that's going to be sorted out very quickly to find out whether or not you are. But you don't forget, on my table that day, apart from your application, was about 30 or 40 other applications. And you go through each application and you look at the quality. And don't forget, irrespective of born in Lebanon, your academic background stood you out anyway. I mean, you went to Harrow, come on.
Leeds Grammar School, I think it was, wasn't it?
Leeds, yeah. And then, you look at all that and then you say, well, this guy's got, what it takes, your O and A level grades and your recommendation, your degree. So I said, well, he deserves a chance. So when you did turn up for an interview, because don't forget, on paper, it's one thing. When you see the individual, it's another thing. And you came across as just you. There was no air of superiority or I'm better than anybody else. I'm just somebody looking for pupillage and I want to learn. So that came across as something that, you take on board. I've interviewed so many people for pupillages and then, they come along sometimes and you say, well, the attitude's a little bit off balance. So, you have to come to a decision. But you were okay. You came across quite a, pleasant individual who wants to learn. And at the end of it all, and I just jokingly said to Denora, I said to you, by the way, do you have any links with Freetown, Sierra Leone? And of course, your answer was yes, apart from the bakery and other connections. And then I said to Denora, oh, by the way, you owe me a fiver. And of course, to you then, it meant nothing because obviously you didn't know the little wager we've had before. And that was it. And that was the beginning of our relationship. And it sort of triggered off from that till now, 2021. And from a pupil to a practicing barrister to somebody that have gone to see me in Ghana, somebody we've traveled to Turks and Caicos, and we're just like friends. And the good thing about it is that not only did you get pupillage, you learned from pupillage. You made sure you picked up, not only from me, but other people in chambers. There were times you just go and watch some other barristers in chambers do cases, and you come back and just go through it with me. And you were a very good pupil. You were a very good pupil because you not only learned, you were fun to be with, and I think our profession, believe it or not, you got to be somebody who has a sense of humor. You got to be very, very down to earth, but yet take it in your stride. And I think you had that sort of quality which made you just blend in. And that's a good quality. It's a good quality for a lot.
I think part of it, and the reason why we got on so well, was because we were both, in terms of, certainly you were laid back. You enjoyed life. You enjoyed every day. You never allowed things to get you down or the system to get you down. And that's what I really learned, I think, when I did my pupillage with you. It wasn't that intensity, but it was also, when it had to be serious, you were serious. And the other thing that I really picked up on, which was always, and I always say, I owe everything
Mhm.
actually to you.
Yeah.
In terms, you gave me a chance when others had closed the door.
Yeah.
And I think your nature was always to give people who otherwise, because of the system being stacked up against them in those days,
Yeah.
you gave a chance to. You
Yeah.
were open-minded, you were hospitable, and you were extremely generous in both your time as when you wanted to teach people, and also your lovely attitude to life. Those are the things that I would never forget. I always thought Chambers was a home away from home. I mean, it was a time when I think you remember it on the Friday nights, we'd actually gather in that
Yeah.
small room
Yeah.
overlooking in a Temple Lane, or in a Temple Lane, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And we would just sit there for hours,
Mm.
you munching away on your pistachio nuts,
100% not.
and Dunora sitting there cracking jokes. Kevin would turn up late as always from Birmingham, and that it was a real lovely family type of atmosphere, which I think many chambers, as much as fancy as they are, always missed it. It didn't have that soul, but certainly uh, our chambers had that soul. So from that point of view, it was great.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. But tell us about how you got into becoming a barrister. Your uncle John Roberts, in fact, was a QC.
Yeah. Well, yeah. In fact, everybody calls him my uncle. In fact, he's my first cousin.
Okay.
John Roberts' dad was my dad's elder brother. So it's my first cousin. And his dad was born in Brazil and came to Freetown with his mom, my granny, and my granddad. And then my dad and the others were born in Freetown. So John, unique man actually, he was in the Air Force, finished, went back to Freetown, air traffic controller, wasn't too happy, came back, started reading law, qualified, started pupillage. Well, he got pupillage actually. And then he started chambers of two-stone buildings. So uniquely, when I was doing the bar, I already had pupillage sorted out. If it wasn't for John Roberts, I probably would never have got into pupillage. So I think there's about 4 of us when we did the bar finals who actually felt very comfortable to say, I've got somewhere to go, right? And I was lucky in that respect because my pupillage was laid on, my first cousin. And it was interesting in as much as that, apart from him being my cousin, there was that age gap. So he was a disciplinarian. Believe you me, I didn't find it easy at all. And it's so unique that, as usual, you know what it's like as a pupil. I'll say to you, Osama, have a look at this. That's our next case. And I'll just wander off and, it's up to you. You can read it, you can make your notes. And on the last day of my first 6, John said to me, this is what we're doing this afternoon. To the magistrate court trial. And I sort of put it down. I was reading it, and then got to about 2 hours before the hearing. And then he said to me, oh, by the way, I'm not going with you. You're doing it. And I'll tell you something. There was somebody else who was doing pupillage who said to me, aren't you worried? And I said to him, well, I'll tell you something. Unless you tell them it's my first trial when we get to the court, I'm not going to tell them. So he said, oh, you're very brave. I said, no, it's the attitude. I'm not going to go in there and say, oh, by the way, this is my first trial. Be as it may, it was one of those cases. In those days, they used to call it the sauce law. Police officers saw a black guy hanging around a woman at the bus stop with a handbag. Usual cross-examination, case proved, mitigation, whatever. Came back to chambers, first case. And it was a nice feeling. It's much as not because I won or lost my last case. I didn't win it, but it was like, I'm now a barrister. Pupillage, first 6 is out of the way. I'm now on my feet. So from that point on, and I'm sure you yourself know, when it was your first case, what it was like. You know, you're on your own, I'm not there. You know, you got to get on with it. So you start thinking, what would Dominic have done? What would John Roberts have done? What would he have said? And it's a routine of picking up on all those things. It's all part of the grooming. You're picking up something from somebody, you're picking up something from somewhere you read or something you saw in a court case you've been to before. So that was good. After that, obviously, I've now got my pupillage sorted, done my 12 months, started practice, but then financially, one needed money. So I got a job, full-time law lecturer, Kilburn Poly. That was interesting as well, because you get into a situation where at that age, you know, I was quite young. I was the only Black lecturer at Kilburn. And there was a lot of students, like so many students who were overseas students from all parts of the world, Malaysians, Africa. And it was useful in as much as to them, they could see that if he can be a lawyer, I can be a lawyer, which was quite good. I admired their own sort of attitude. And I took great pleasure in taking things very, very slowly with them to say, look, law is something you can't get to grips with. So we had all that sort of banter going backwards and forward. And most of them now carried on practicing barristers in Nigeria, some in London, some are solicitors. And it's good to bump into them now and again and say, oh, you remember me? And I say, yeah. Funny thing is, you sit in front of a class of about 20 people. They all see you. You see 20 people. And I had 3 groups in those days, and 3 groups of 20, about 60 people every year. And you do remember them. And so that teaching was also useful. But the disadvantage one has in the teaching or being a barrister in those days can be summarized in this way. If you think everybody you're coming across is going to be a racist, or is going to have a predilection against you because of your color, you're not going to be a good barrister, or you're not going to be a good law lecturer. You have to say there's a possibility that that person may or may not like me because of my color. I'll give you a classic example. In my final year of being a full-time law lecturer, I was sitting in the staff room marking some scripts from A-level law scripts when one of the lecturers, Maeve Sullivan, I think her name was, came in with an external examiner from London University who'd come to do some Spanish oral exams. And I was the only one in the staff room. And 2 women entered, and Maeve said to me, are you going to be in the staff room for 5 minutes? And I said, yeah. And she said, fine, I'll leave my handbag with you, and I'll take this lady to the ladies' toilet. And I said, fine, Maeve. So she goes out, shuts the door, and there was a scream in the corridor. She comes running back into the staff room and says, you'll never believe what she's just said. Do I trust that porter with my handbag? Now, the difficulty I have is this. I don't mind her saying, do you trust that junior lecturer with my handbag? Do you trust that senior lecturer with my handbag? She actually gave me a dubbed porter. I didn't have a uniform on. I didn't have any badge that indicates I'm a porter. So it got to boil down to that. How can a Black guy be anything else but a porter in this institution? And the whole institution that day were up in arms. Their telephone, London University thing were cancelled. All the exams that day were cancelled. And most of the staff came up to me and said, oh, we're so sorry about what happened. And I was very philosophical about it. And I would say to them, well, you know something? If that had been you gone to a pub in Brixton and seen a Black guy, would you leave your handbag near him? Oh, no, you're being difficult. I said, no, I'm not. You know I'm a law lecturer, all of you, but she doesn't. She still thinks that, you know, but what got me was the job she gave me. She could have just said another lecturer, you know, that would have been fine enough. And, you know, you get into that. So has things changed? Well, you go to the bar. Yes, of course, you go to court and they look at you and they think something about it. Don't automatically think that that's because they think you're incompetent. You're incompetent when you open your mouth and you haven't read your brief, you don't know your defense, and you can't mitigate, and you can't cross-examine. That's what you got to worry about. Your color, you can't change. It's there, and it's going to follow you wherever you go. So you and I know that we've gone to court, you come across a judge who you may think he's against you because of your color, but you could be so wrong. He may actually want you to be better than the last black barrister he saw. I know not. But my function was always, why am I here? What's the charge? What's the defense? Have we got the potential defense witnesses? Will my client come up to proof? Once you get hold of that and concentrate on that, anything else doesn't really matter. Your color is always going to be your color. I remember, as you well know, when we did the matter at Snaresbrook, Clearland, yes, and Adamaco, that lasted for about 4 weeks. And in fact, I think on one of the days you had to leave because you had some of your courses, your continuing education course. Which
yes, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And now you must have picked up so many things from that case. First of all, you can't fault that particular judge. He had nothing to do with it. He doesn't like black people. What he did not like was the antics of one of the defendants, right? And as nice as everything was, he had to take control of the case because it was going out of hand. Now, during that hearing, the various days of the hearing, you were sitting behind me because don't forget, the first chap on the indictment had a junior, and they wouldn't give me a junior as usual. They say, well, Mr. Daneshyar, your pupil is there, he can take notes for you, which is fine. I rely on your notes anyway. But you saw the way things transpired, the way witnesses were called, the way we cross-examined, the way we just went forward. But at the end of the day, we had an uphill task. It wasn't an easy thing we were putting forward. Our defense was like duress, and given all the facts, we had an uphill task. But what you must have got from that case is, it doesn't matter how many Lever Act files you've got. You must concentrate on your defense. You must concentrate on your cross-examination. And irrespective of the fact that you may have a different color from the other barristers, it doesn't really come into the equation. You also know that once we got to the stage of lifting yourself up against the parapet, like for example, once we had a case in Birmingham, and it was a simple case of an appeal from the magistrate's court to the Crown Court. Another chap in Chambers was meant to have gone to Birmingham to do it. On Sunday evening, he telephoned me and said, oh, I don't want to go to Birmingham. Can you go? And I'll do the London matter. And I said, oh my God, here we go again. But I went and took the case, brief from him, and then I went to Birmingham. And that particular case ended up being something which is reported. Comley and Cunningham, back calculation. Somebody who's had so much alcohol, but then when he was tested, he was now under the limit. Can you back calculate to prove he must have been drunk? Magistrates Court, Crown Court appealing, Birmingham said, yes, the prosecution can. Well, that gave me a bit of a burden because I then had to say, well, we'll go to the divisional court to say, no, you can't, because it was all based on the hip flask defense. The period when people who had had an accident would stop, take their alcohol, which they've got in a hip flask, and wait till the police arrive and start pouring it down their throat and say to the officer, but you've just seen me drink, come on. Or accident, drive home, sit at home, drink, phone the police. When they come, oh, I've been at home for half an hour steadying my nerves. Now, a lot of people were getting away with that defense of hip flasks. So the law was amended to say, if you are going to raise post-accident alcohol consumption, you'll have to prove that you were sober before the accident. That was the law. So that's fair enough, because if you say, look, I was sober before the accident, so it proves that you were sober. What the prosecution did in Birmingham is to say, we can also now use the same logic to prove that you must have been drunk. Because in my case, the guy was unconscious about a day and a half or so. When they did take the sample, he's now under the limit, which means you can't charge him. But they said, yes, we can do a back calculation. You must, if you got that now, you must have had that much earlier on. And I thought, well, that doesn't sound right. So the argument in front of the divisional court is that apart from the fact that the mischief of hip flask has been resolved, so that's the mischief. Why was the law amended? To get rid of that mischief. Once you get rid of the mischief, that's it. They can't then say, we can use the same logic to convict you. And the divisional court, 2 days we were there. The first day, they were sort of nodding. Second day, they were even nodding more because the example I gave us, this would be so unfair. Because take, for example, an individual who say is a Muslim. He's never consumed alcohol in his life. Never. He wins, then it's the pools, not the lottery. Say, this is the example I gave to the Muslim wins the pools, 6 million. Photo shoot, they say to him, glass of champagne, just put it to your lips. So that the photograph, just put it to your lips, that's all. So he puts the glass of champagne to his lips, a little bit of champagne touches his lips. He's going home, they stop him, they breathalyze him, and he's got point whatever. Technically, the prosecution can say, if this is what you've got now, then 2 hours ago, you must have had, because he's, and they were sort of nodding again, saying, well, that's the point. Because he's got this now, doesn't mean he had a larger amount earlier on. All it means is this is what he's got now. So went home, next day came back. Are they different judges? They started kicking me from pillar to post. We can't see your point. Now, obviously, it's a policy decision. Stop people drink and driving.
Yeah.
So they ruled against us. We lost. And I got up and said, can I have leave to go to the House of Lords? No, you can't. You go and get it yourself. And the normal sort of thing as well. Then
I
again,
think it's a good time here to stop because because we're going into a commercial break, and then we'll pick it up after the break.
Okay.
So this is Ramadan Radio on 87.9 FM. Please feel free to call us or text us. You've got the text number, but we'll pick up that story after the break, Dominic. Okay, so let's go to the commercial break. welcome back to Ramadan Radio. We have with us a special guest to me, Dominic Roberts, my pupil master. I always say I learned everything from Dominic. I learned how to be, shall we say, laissez-faire, ignore things, handle things with dignity, not really stand up or be goaded by a lot of people. And that was all due to you, really. The other thing I learned from you, I think, is the humility, how you can be successful, how you can be knowledgeable, but at the same time be grounded. And the most important thing is actually do not forget where you came from. There are certain things in life that we never have a choice about. And one of them is actually our background, our skin color, our culture. We are born into those. They're part of us. It's what makes us what we are. And that, what I learned from you was the fact that that was to be celebrated as opposed to be used as to have a sense of shame about it. And I'm forever grateful for that. You, before the break, just if you want to join us, for those listeners, you feel free to text on 077 488 5505. You can put the message through. That's a text message or WhatsApp. So feel free. Dominic, you were telling us about your case, which I think divisional court said no, they weren't going to give you leave to go to the House of Lords. So you, I take it, you had to petition the House of Lords yourself.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. That was indeed a daunting task because one had to sit down and get it right. And the petition took quite a while to put together. And once it was lodged, and then we had a hearing date. And then again, it all started because there I am going to the House of Lords to ask for leave. And don't forget, in those days, it's got to be on a point of law of general public importance. And of course, drink, drive, and back calculation was. But still, you really need to be confident enough. When I got there into the robing room, I looked around and I thought, what am I doing here? Got robed, went upstairs with my leverage file, and the individual who's in charge of it told me, stand there. The law lords will appear from that end. Wait till they enter. I'll stamp on the floor, and then you open that door, you enter, and I'm standing there and I'm thinking, my God, this is some daunting task. And from the corner of my eyes, I saw about 7 law lords, black suits. I'm robed in their black suits. They entered, the guy did the stamping on the floor. I opened the door, gone up there, stood up, got my leverage file open, and I introduced myself, my Lord. And Lord Bridge in the middle said, Mr. Roberts, we've read your petition. We think we will grant you leave. Is there anything you want to add? And you should have seen my legs buckle. And I said, my lords, no. And I was out of there. Because what's the point in standing there to say, yes, I want to add something when you've already got what you came for? So it was quite an achievement to say, well, having read the petition, and that's the good thing. If you do something on paper, which is good, they read it, just like submissions, you're halfway there. So then the next task was, we're now going to have a full hearing in the House of Lords, but the solicitors then, I think it was Phil Kremen Small, then got John Morris QC. He was then the Shadow Attorney General to lead me. So I was led by John Morris QC, went to the House of Lords, I think a couple of months later. And again, that was an interesting experience. You know, sat down there, arguments on both sides. Then they adjourned, reserved their judgment. And again, as the junior, I had to go and take the judgment. So I went on my own, sat down there in the House of Lords when they read out there, bowed and left. So that was an experience. But then you and I know that it all then became the individual who turned down the brief that day and didn't want to go to Birmingham did not get the benefit of seeing his name on the law report. and solicitors phoning up and say, "Oh, my client's got drink and drive. Can we have Mr. Roberts? He's the expert." And of course, you know that. I'm sure you've got something similar to tell me. When they phone and ask for Dominique Roberts, you know what they're thinking. And anyway, that was a nice period where quite a lot of drink drive cases came through chambers to the clerks and from various solicitors. And it was enjoyable. But the hard work was putting together that argument about hip flask defense, you know, the rule, the mischief rule, and that's legal points. Those are arguments, and it's fun. It's fun when you pick out a legal point and thrash it.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, sometimes things do work. I mean, I think you remember how I ended up doing so much work in Birmingham. It was as a result of J.R. Jones phoning up all around Birmingham chambers. Nobody wanted to work on a Saturday morning. The client was Munir Hussain. I still remember it. It was up for a bit of tatting on a church, nicking some lead. Kate Stead had covered the matter for him. Kate didn't want to travel to Birmingham on a Saturday morning, and I ended up getting him bail on that at 9 o'clock Saturday morning. And since from then on, basically Shabir liked my attitude, and he instructed me quite extensively to cover his matters in Birmingham. So these things do work. But the interesting thing, and I still remember, you're right. I mean, people would think Roberts. I actually thought you were Welsh when he first phoned me. And the reason why actually I specifically targeted, I remember when I was applying for pupillage, I sent out about a mail shop. I was so desperate, 250 CVs, right? And then I looked through the bar directory, and I thought, Chambers of Wilfred Forster Jones. And I thought, you know what? Forster and Jones, he must be Welsh. This guy is going to have sympathy because the Welsh people discriminated against. I'm going to also try my luck.
Yeah.
So, and I remember when I first came through Chambers, was it Brian Peters who was the clerk at the time?
Yeah,
Brian Peters, yeah. We can tell a story or two about Brian Peters. But anyway, Mr. Roberts, Mr. Roberts in there. I knock on the door, I come in, and you had that punchline always, didn't you? Remember what it was?
Yes.
I said, Mr. Roberts, what was your reaction?
I bet you thought I was much taller.
Yes. Because I say, it's Welsh name I'd never expected to see in Africa. As I say, it was a lovely story because, as you rightly pointed out, I didn't know that there was a bet. And I think it's amazing how fate works, because in order to prepare for the interview, I thought, right, I'm going to go and get myself all dollied up. I turn up in Joe Johnson's Snooker Club because I thought this was going to be an exclusive place. I have a sauna, and lo and behold, the sauna was so badly infected. I turned up with a boil, if you remember. Yes. On the side of my face. But then the famous question was, do you know anyone in Freetown, Sierra Leone? And I said, yeah, my sister-in-law's aunt has a bakery. And you turn around to Denora and say, you owe me a $5. And when can you start? So they were fun days. And I think what made my life in Chambers special was never presume anything. And I think the first brief you ever gave me, I remember my reaction. I pick up the papers and I see the guy was called Hussain. I say, Dominic, this guy is a Muslim. And your reaction was, yeah, just because he's a Muslim, it doesn't mean they don't commit crime. But you're right about misconceptions. You're right about the fact that you didn't need to worry about your background because there was nothing you can do to change that. The only thing you could do was work harder. And that was the motto which both yourself, Denora, Kevin, Wolf used to drill into us. And you know, that's ultimately what made us. In terms of what was your perception in those days? I mean, late 1970s, early 1980s. I mean, the atmosphere is completely different to what it was on an individual level. Yeah. Racism was everywhere.
It was everywhere. And the thing is, again, You see, you remember the Campsfield riot case because you were in
Yes.
there. Well, right.
Yes.
Now, here we are, we're doing a Campsfield riot case where you had about 9 defendants. As you well know, outside the court, every day were people with placards, the indigenous people, the English people with placards. Now, it sounds funny, but they were actually demonstrating against the Home Office and the government for wanting to throw those chaps out of the country. So it was positive demonstration. But who suffered one day? I did. Because if you remember, the junior for the prosecution was a Nigerian barrister. And on one occasion, I'm coming into the court and they said, there is, and they tried to hit me with their placards, thinking I was Oba. One black guy is just as good as another black guy. Luckily, one of the Oderis said, no, he's on our side. So it's again, they're right, I'm on their side. But the placards were there to say, these guys deserve to stay in the UK. We don't care what you say they've done. We don't care if they burnt down Campsfield Detention Centre. We're fighting for their own safety. But the long and short of it is, there I was, a black guy, on their side. So again, the perception of it's not every white person who dislikes black people.
Yeah.
One's always got to remember that. And then when you look at it from the other angle, once we did get the court system going on that particular trial, after about 3 weeks, it collapsed because the evidence that was coming out was so, helter-skelter that the judge looked at it and said to the prosecutor, do you seriously want to continue with this case? Right? And of course, there was a lot of damage done. People were injured. But at the end of the day, the evidence which was coming out was so flimsy that the judge had to ask the prosecution, and they withdrew. They threw their towel in. But there we are. But you also could see that it wasn't people outside demonstrating that we don't want these guys in the country. They were actually saying, we want them to stay. You see, all the people outside with placards were justice for the Campsfield, justice for leave them alone. You see, it wasn't a negative, And the way the cab rank principle works in our profession. On numerous occasions, I've had to represent skinheads. Why? Because on one occasion, I got one guy off who was a skinhead. And every time he's in trouble or his mates, they'll go to the same solicitor and say, we want Mr. Roberts to represent us. And once the brief gets to you, you can't say, I'm not representing him because he's a skinhead. Normally, they'll go and beat up. I don't know what I don't know whether they had a buzz about it, because what they normally used to do, so on a day they're bored, they go to a tube station or a train station, jump over the barrier and start running. They've got a ticket, a valid ticket, and they'll be chased by the ticket collectors, rugby tackle to the floor, fight comes on, and then they say, I got a ticket. And then they'll say, well, you've assaulted me. The long and short of it is, people say to me, why did you have to go and represent them? And I've seen some jurors look at me and thinking, but it's a cab rank principle. I can't turn them down. And it's the same with rape cases. In those days, you say, I've got a case I'm doing next week, it's a rape case. You don't represent rapists, do you? And I always say, well, if it was your brother or your uncle, wouldn't you like me to represent you? But that's different. My uncle and brother wouldn't commit rape. So what's the logic?
It's kind of it is difficult to explain to non-professionals as to what your professional duty is. I mean, at the end of the day, there's a presumption of innocence,
exactly.
and you have to abide by that principle. I think one particular time, and it was the case of Lasisi Jima. I mean, that sort of, I mean, it was obvious as to when the solicitor said, we don't instruct Mr. Roberts, or we don't know Mr. Roberts, exactly what they meant. I think I found that very distasteful. I felt angry on your behalf, but what actually I remember from it is how philosophical you were about it. I mean, for you, it was probably what you'd faced all the time. That sort of thing. They don't effectively want to say that we can't instruct Dominic because of his background. They'll just say, well, we don't instruct him. But the question that always asked is, why would you not instruct Dominic Roberts when the client is clearly asking for Dominic Roberts? He's in fact a Ghanaian. I think he was coming in because he had a cow foot. But that is how they used to couch it. We don't know him. But I mean, you know, nevertheless, you coming up towards the end of the show, your story was a positive story in that you went to the House of Lords. That is a dream for many a lawyer. I think when you came out after having leave to appeal, you were probably the most popular junior there with the silks who was surrounding you.
Extremely.
Well, look, on this positive note, I think we're just coming towards the end of the show. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking time out of your Saturday morning. And it's always, no, you know what? As I've always said, without you, I wouldn't be where I was. You gave me the chance, and I'm forever grateful for that.
You deserved it, and you've done very well from that day.
Thank you, Dominic. Well, listeners, thank you for joining us. From us, all I can say is Assalamu alaikum and have a good day. Thank you, Dominic.
Okay, thanks, Ozzy.